It's time to start the ritual. Welcome to Rotted, Review of the Day. And today I'm going to be reviewing the 2017 Netflix exclusive movie, The Ritual. This movie was sent to me by request, recommendation by a viewer of this channel, Scott Daniels. And I would like to encourage anybody that wants to make a recommendation for me to watch a film and review it here on Rotted, please leave a comment down below, and I will see what I can do to tackle that. But to Scott, thank you very much, because honestly, I really, really like this movie. It blew me away, and there's several reasons for that I'm going to get into in more detail, both here, which is spoiler-free, and in the spoiler-filled deep dive discussion. Principally, I think what made this not just a really good horror film, but a really good film overall was how well balanced it was. There's a major school of thought that there are three main types of conflict: man versus self, man versus man, and man versus nature. And this movie actually tackled all three. And it did so deftly. It balanced things wonderfully, hopping from one foot to the other in seamless transition. And I really had to appreciate it for that. Without giving any kind of spoilers, there is a point in the movie, and it is towards the end-ish, I'd say, where you thought that Act 3 might begin, that it, and I know I use this term a fair bit on this channel, but it took a tonal shift, and usually that can be disarming, and usually that is to the detriment of the movie when it's done that late. But in this one, it worked. It raised a few red flags for me while I was watching it, but I kept my objectivity, I kept watching through, and darn if it didn't work. So, let's just go ahead and get right into the scoring here. As always, 5 different categories worth up to 20 points each for a total possible score of 100 points. And the first category is plot/subtext. The plot of this one is 4 friends who had previously encountered a bit of a tragedy, are going on a hiking adventure in Sweden, and it's in remembrance of a friend. And I'm trying not to give any kind of real spoilers, but I mean, we are talking about the first 5-10 minutes of the movie here. Regardless, it is in remembrance of a friend, and they are making this trek and this journey. Along the way, which so far the hike had been up in the fielded mountains and plains and so forth, along made trails, one of them gets injured, and they decide to take a shortcut so that they can trim an entire day off the hike back and hopefully get their friend. He's not mortally wounded or anything. He twisted his knee, but they don't want him belly aching for 3 days on the way back. They decide to go ahead and bring him back and cut a day off the trip, and go by the way the crow flies, which is through the woods. And from there, things start going terribly wrong. And it very much is man versus self. The critical component of this is the main character, and all the characters are very well balanced with how well they're structured, how much screen time they get, how well they were developed, and what each of them brings to the party in this movie. But there is the main character in this, and he is struggling very much with events that happened at the beginning of the movie. And there's a lot of man versus self, and in the man versus nature, in the spiritual aspect of things that come forward, it heightens the man versus self portion of it. And then we get into a whole other category of things as the film progresses. But the thing that I really liked about this movie was the nature of the setting was beautiful, and yet the film made it so ominous and so scary that I think it worked really, really well. And I want to get into a particular aspect of the fear thing within the last category that I'm going to be covering here. I don't want to jump the gun on it, But regardless, I gave the plot an 18 out of 20. Not only was it solid throughout, it made that seamless transition around Act 3, and it kept going with it in a really wonderful way, and ultimately I had to really applaud how not just it flowed throughout, but also how it ended. I was not expecting a movie to be this solid. The intent was, I think, to be a character study in a horrific setting that it was forcing characters to go through very harsh introspection while also pitting them against dire survivalist odds. And that is one of the main things that gets balanced in this is while things are going on around them that is spiritual, possibly supernatural, possibly third-party manipulative, they are trying to keep calm enough to focus on the situation at hand, which on face level is dire. How much time do you devote to what you may have just seen that may have been an apparition, may have been supernatural, may have been otherworldly, when right in front of you, you have a seemingly never-ending trail, limited supplies, and you need to get out. It's an interesting balance with all that. And then, the inevitable falling out of otherwise friendly characters to one another in extreme settings, but never going so far as to be irritating to the audience. Obviously there's falling out, obviously there's infighting, but it never gets to the degree that you start to just hate the characters. You love them through and through, and I think each and every one of them. So that alone packed in a punch to me. So high marks for what they intended to be, and high marks for delivering what they intended to be. So I gave that an 18 out of 22. 20 also. The acting was something that I don't think this movie could have worked at all if the acting hadn't been stupendous, and it was. It was very, very much a character study. There were effects, there were focus on surroundings, it very much was odds stacked against them, but ultimately it was a character study. It dealt with the way that their relationship worked with each other, with the way that they saw themselves, and the acting really sold that, both the extremity of the situation, the personal pain of the past, and the hope for the future while they were in this terrible setting. So every part of that got sold to me, and the portion that happens in the first 10 minutes was raw and powerful, and the acting was a very critical component of that. So high marks to that as well. I very, very solid performance by everybody all around, including and especially the main character. So 17 out of 20 for that. The technical, despite being set in the woods, I have to give high marks for the technical portions of this. It didn't have a ton of effects, but what the effects were amazing and worked so well within the context of the forest and of nature. There were practical effects, there were CG effects, and just from a technical point of view, the thing I really had to appreciate about this movie is that it could have so easily gone the route of found footage and first-person viewpoint, and so many movies that are similar to this have done that mode. This didn't. This was strictly, camera following the characters. You are the third party as the audience member kind of movie. And I think that when you could have gone first-person mode, when you could have gone found footage, and you choose to do that, but then you still make the nature, and by that I mean both the natural world that they're in and the very character of the movie work for you. The lighting and the shadows and the manipulation of them, of peeking at things, did you actually, when you're looking at rows and rows and rows and rows of trees, and you're looking at the deep layers that goes through. Did you maybe see something there? Did that move? Did that not? You're really kind of not sure, and it works terribly well in this movie. They really nailed down every technical aspect that I really loved. So 18 out of 20 for that. The fear quotient. Now this is where I want to get into something here. This movie did something that very few movies do. A lot of horror movies will rely on jump scares. That's a handy tool in the toolbox that gets used frequently. A lot of them will rely on suspense and long drawn out moments. And a lot of them will rely on blood and gore and the things that are visually, aesthetically appealing in the most grotesque fashion. This went all three of those, but it added a fourth layer. And this layer is something so rarely used in horror films, and it requires a deft hand, and it is so difficult to achieve, but this achieved it, and that's dread. Not only did it have suspenseful moments, not only did it have its fair share of jump scares, not only did it have its fair share of blood and gore, but it had dread. As they were walking through the wilderness, as they encountered, one thing after another, and they saw a cabin, just the visual sight of that cabin in the context of everything that they had encountered before and gone through before was enough to fill you with so much dread of what now, and of what are we going to watch them go through next. And something as simple as a character separating from the rest of the group to just go up to a hilltop and just look at what's there, knowing that he's only 2 minutes away from the rest of the group and he's just looking at things. You just have this feeling that there's a very strong possibility that he's never going to find the group again. And that comes from the dread of the setting that they instilled in. And to a slight degree, I think the Blair Witch Project did that when at the end of that movie, and spoiler alert, I suppose there, but who hasn't seen it at this point, at the very end when you see the house and the child handprints there, that was a interesting moment of dread there, but it was at the very end, and it only worked so. This movie played it out from the moment, I think, that they entered the forest all the way through the rest of the movie. And I have to really applaud that. So overall, 16 out of 20 there. There were moments that were, supposed to be scary, but ultimately, like a jump scare that may have failed here and there. And I don't think, despite everything that I've praised on this movie, that I'm going to be turning off the lights tonight and be wondering about, what's in the dark for me. So 16 out of 20 there. That's still, pretty darn high. So total score of 87 points, which may be, and I'd have to go back and check the rest of the videos I've done so far, but that may be the highest I've recorded on Rotted so far. If not, it's certainly right up there. So thank you again, Scott Daniels, for recommending The Ritual. I want to go over a lot more of this in the deep dive spoiler-filled discussion video that will accompany this one. So please watch that if you don't mind having the movie spoiled, or if you've seen it, preferably if you've seen it and you want to dig into the film deeper. So that should about do it for The Ritual. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror film, first make sure that it's good and rotted.